And for a more focused perspective, we're joined now by Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center of Washington. Mr. Russell, welcome to In Focus. What's the significance of these alleged U.S. covert actions in Greenland, and what do they suggest about Trump's long-standing Arctic ambitions?
Well, it's almost comical if it wasn't real. I mean, this is straight out of a movie almost. And the reality is this is starting to get under the skin of the Danes. The Danes have rightful title to Greenland. It is a territory under their sovereign control. And, you know, this is now the second time that Danish Foreign Minister Rasmussen has had to summon the ambassador to his office to say, hey, look, stand down. Is this going to cause a major territorial fight in Greenland? No. Let's be clear. The majority of the 60 to 70,000 people that live on the island want to be part of. They don't want to be part of the United States. They're very happy with Danish sovereignty. So this is getting really, really out of hand, but it's being blown out of proportion by Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you've mentioned, it is getting on their nerves, and this isn't the first time Denmark has summoned a U.S. envoy over Greenland. So are we witnessing a deliberate pressure campaign now in front of the whole world?
The short answer here is yes. I mean, we are. Look, there's reason why there would be strong interest from the United States. As you pointed out in your opening, it's full of rare earth metals that are very key to Donald Trump and his agenda. It is very strategic in the defense of the Arctic. It's a critical point in dealing with the global environmental issues, and plus it's a great strategic point for NATO and our other partner countries in the Arctic, because it gives us a position in not only the future navigation in the Arctic Ocean, but also from a military strategy standpoint. That being the case, we have to look at the fact that this attention being brought to the island is unwanted and unnecessary, because all it would take really is just Donald Trump, if he is such a great deal maker, just sitting down with the Danes and coming up with, if you want the rare earth metals, there might be a way to do it, but you've got to do it in a way that doesn't look like you're trying to undermine the sovereign government that has territorial control over the island.
Mm-hmm. Well, his deal-making skills probably need a little bit of hand, and that's why the report outlines alleged efforts to recruit pro-Trump Greenlanders. How unusual or dangerous is such influence building in a democratic ally?
It's unknown, because quite frankly, in my almost 40 years of government, I've never seen an operation that was so ham-handedly implemented as this one. It's not like three former Trump administration officials show up on the island of Greenland and start knocking on doors. That's not going to get attention. It's not. I don't think that this is going to cause the breakup or any sort of bilateral dissolution of the relationship between Denmark and the United States. What it does do is become an annoyance. And what it does do is solidify, for example, you look at the Danes, the Danes look at trading partners. This is a country that has been hit by tariffs by Trump as part of the global tariffs initiative. They're continuing to get pressure on this Greenland situation. If anything is going to solidify the Danes aligning themselves more closely, economic, politically, and strategically with the European partners rather than us, something this stupid would be the reason for them to do that, if that makes sense, Amy.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're ruling out a military option. Trump hasn't ruled out using the military, though. or economic force to secure Greenland. Now, could this escalate into a diplomatic rift with Denmark or even within NATO?
Well, it's become a diplomatic rift. I mean, as much as we're joking about it right now, the fact that the foreign minister had to summon the U.S. ambassador to his office to discuss this issue is a diplomatic rift. Let's set one thing clear, though, here. The idea that Donald Trump is going to use military force against Greenland, which is under sovereign territorial control of Denmark, we would basically have to invoke NATO Article 5 on ourselves, which is never going to happen. That's just not a reality. But what this does do is kind of irritate not just the Danes, but it irritates the rest of Europe. Here's another example of Donald Trump trying to bully his way like a spoiled baby, saying, look, I want Greenland, and if I don't get it, I'm going to find a way to get it, and if I don't, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum, and I'm going to make it miserable for everybody. That's kind of what he's doing here.
Mm-hmm. Do you also see echoes of Cold War tactics, or is this purely the bullish Trump-era brand of geopolitical maneuvering you're talking about?
To the first part of your question, do I see Cold War era tradecraft being executed here? Straight answer, absolutely not. This is an amateur operation. This is comical. And so, no, this does not remind me of really old school tradecraft. What it does remind me, though, is that the lack of just common sense being used by this administration on this, it doesn't make sense from a strategic or diplomatic. We have a presence there militarily. We could build on those building blocks there and work with the Danes and work with our NATO partners to help establish a larger presence to help secure our Arctic situation. That's easy. But the idea that we're trying to undermine a NATO ally, we're trying to undermine the people that actually live there every day to try and push an American agenda on foreign soil is just ludicrous, not only to our partners, but more importantly, it's becoming kind of ludicrous to Americans here. They're like, we're not going to militarily intervene in the sovereignty of Greenland for our own benefit. That just doesn't make sense, and that's not what we signed up for.
Mm-hmm. Then, practically speaking, how should Denmark and Greenland respond diplomatically other than summoning the US ambassador? What tools does the European Union have to counter this type of covert influence?
Quite frankly, I don't think that the Danes or the EU want to escalate this any further. I mean, are there ways they could? Sure. They could put out, the EU could put out a resolution of condemnation against Donald Trump and the American government for, for attempting subversive actions against their sovereignty. That's one thing. They could take this complaint to the ICC and file a civil complaint saying, hey, look, this is just dumb. We'll deal with this judiciously, except the one problem is the U.S. doesn't recognize the ICC. So that being the case, the other issue here is that they could start looking at tariffs. They could ask the Department of Defense to remove its personnel and its resources from the island. There's several ways, but be very clear. Escalate and keep escalating till it gets out of control and it becomes a toxic relationship. I don't think that's going to be happening.
Mr. Russell, now talking about the importance and the advantages that Greenland has to offer the United States beyond the mineral wealth, the military security or the Arctic security implications at play. You spoke about China, you spoke about NATO. So is that what it's really about?
You know, it's part of it. It really is part of it. And here's why. The U.S. Has pretty much had the rest of the world eat our lunch when it comes to the protection of our interests from both an economic and a national security standpoint in the Arctic. Russia is obviously a very dominant factor in the Arctic. China has spent a lot of money and put a lot of resources towards its position in the Arctic, and then plus our Scandinavian partners in Norway, Sweden, Finland, even Denmark have been putting a lot of effort and investing in the future of their position in the Arctic. The U.S. hasn't. You talk about icebreakers. The U.S. currently has 4, now 2 that are Arctic capable to be deployed. The Russians have dozens. The Chinese have dozens. And then even our smaller NATO partners have many. When you look at the navigational possibilities, which is going to be key for commerce and trade, when you look at the national strategic standpoints of getting close into possible waters of adversaries, being the Russians being so close to our Scandinavian partners and even to Alaska and even to Canada. Those become very big problems. And plus, just from the economic value, there's a lot of untouched raw materials in Greenland. Greenland is the population of Greenland is so minuscule as compared to the rest of the untouched, scenery of that island. Make no mistake about it, there's a lot of money to be had there. So there's all kinds of factors in here that make it worthy of a fight like this, but it doesn't justify the fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you expect the next move for President Trump to be? Do you think he will go on with maybe imposing economic sanctions, more tariffs on Denmark, or do you think he will back down?
That's a very good question. And unless, Donald Trump threatens, 150% tariffs on Legos, I don't think that there's really much here we can do other than sit down and have an adult conversation and start acting like adults at the table with our Danish partners. But make no mistake about it, this is going to be more of a diplomatic nuisance and great fodder for news coverage rather than creating a very strong political lift. If it does escalate, then we're going to have to retool and rethink this. But I just don't see any sort of reasoning why Donald Trump would want to push this so far as to completely sever any sort of credibility we would have with another European and Nordic partner.
Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, thank you very much for breaking down this web of covert influence and Arctic strategy. Whether it's the streets of Lomas de Zamora or the icy expanse of Greenland, today's episode reminds us that the battle of power, whether through scandal or shadow ops, knows no borders. Presidents promised reform, superpowers promised security, but behind every campaign trail and geopolitical chessboard lies a deeper struggle for control. I'm Hani Asif, and this has been In Focus.